Shalom. All praises, blessings, glories, and honors to Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Racha, Kodash. Double honors to my elder apostles and bishop elders of Great Millstone, who taught me this truth, as well of men of like mind. Shalom wa chasad, which means peace and mercy to the elect of the nation of Israel, whom you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native American Indians, and Israelite foreigners of the seed line of our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whom are scattered here in America, which is Babylon the Great, and abroad. To you I say Shalom, beginning with the 144,000 prophets, and Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, willing, this lesson is edifying and informative. My name is Quanawath, and in the news from the RT, IMF, that is the International Monetary Fund, lambasts U.S. over ballooning debt. The Biden administration's fiscal policy is cause for concern, according to a report. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, has raised concerns about overspending by the U.S. government, and is the reason why we have seen a recent rise in the Consumer Price Index, which signals that inflation is back on the rise, warning it has been reigniting inflation risks and undermining financial stability around the world. And so inflation is not so-called transitory, as the Fed Chair Jerome Powell would usually say, and have stated on numerous occasions in the past. There will be no so-called soft landing. The U.S. federal budget deficit jumped from $1.4 trillion in fiscal 2022 to $1.7 trillion last year, according to the latest World Economic Outlook issued by the IMF. That's a 0.3 billion in increase from 0.4. The exceptional recent performance of the United States is certainly impressive and a major driver of global growth, the IMF said. However, the report explained that this reflects strong demand factors as well, including a fiscal stance that is out of line with long-term physical sustainability. The ballooning U.S. national debt, which exceeded $34 trillion in December and counting, even as I speak, and the fiscal deficit threatened to exacerbate sky-high levels of inflation, while posing a long-term risk to the global economy, according to the report. And we understand, according to the book of Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter, that debt is, in the Hebrew, ibatyat, which is his thick clay, in which he covers himself with, in which he layeth himself with. According to the report, something will have to give, the IMF warned. And eventually, when all these countries are ready to finally ditch the dollar, then we will begin to see an extremely rapid erosion in the value of the dollar. Okay, because many countries will begin to simultaneously move away, because it will have to be something that will be done coordinated. They can't just ditch the dollar because they'll destroy themselves. So these Edomites, they know exactly what they're doing. They're basically setting things in place so that when they're ready to ditch the dollar, they'll all do so together and then transition to their new system, which will be digital, all in preparation for when they mandate the MOTB, which is the RFID microchip, also known as the NFC chip implant in Europe, also known as the biochip implant. The word bio means living or alive. Also known as the brain chip implant, i.e. Elon Musk's Neuralink, among others. It will be a transition to their New World Order system. And so before I read on, let's get the book of Habakkuk in the GNT, second chapter, around about the 5th verse. In fact, the 6th verse. The conquered people, which are the nations, the heathen nations, and we are conquered as well. But in this particular scripture, it is referring to the heathen nations. The conquered people will taunt their conquerors and show their scorn for them. They will say, "You take what isn't yours." And Esau, Edom, does this to our people as well that are located in countries like Peru, Panama, and certain regions in South America. But they've especially done this to other heathen nations. They identify a country under the guise of globalization. Excuse me. And they would send in what is known as an economic hitman to that country that is rich in resources to persuade the powers that be in that country to sign certain contracts, so that, the U.S. can come in there and the businesses can build, and they'll say, "Oh, it's for the benefit of the people, it's, for the benefit of your nation." But in all actuality, it's for their benefit. But if you sign this contract, it'll benefit, your people. You'll have more jobs in your country because we'll create more jobs, blah, 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 blah. And I come to find out, it was all a scam. And if they don't sign it, then they send in what's known as jackals, which are assassins, to take out the president that would have been refusing to sign the contract. And if they fail, because the attempt is to replace the regime, and if they fail, they would then send in the military. They would stage a coup. They hire crisis actors. They'll do all kind of shit, and they'll stage coups, man. And eventually they send in the military. They say, "Okay, see, now we're justified in going in there because you're corrupt. So we gotta get you out of there for the people's sake, and replace you with somebody that's more so-called sufficient, right? And that person would be one of their own puppets that would then sign the agreement, paving the way for them to go into that country to build and extract and suck out all of its resources and make the people get poor, man. So this man, he has a history of doing that. Watch, what is that? The Confession of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. Great documentary. It says, they will say, you take what isn't yours, but you are doomed. How long will you go on getting rich by forcing your debtors to pay up? Now, in the King James, it says this: shall not all these take up a parable against him? And a taunting proverb against him? Against who? Against Esau. All these nations have been taken up taunting proverbs against Esau, Edom. And say, woe to him, which means destruction to him, that increaseth that which is not his. You're taking the resources of other countries, impoverishing them. How long? So how long is this going to continue? And to him that ladeth himself a thick clay. Now, again, when you go into that word thick clay, in the Hebrew it is ibatyat, which means heavy debts, heavy burdens, pledges, which is this man's national debt, which will only keep ballooning. And eventually, something will have to give, according to the IMF. Something will have to give. The U.S. exceeded its debt ceiling, which was legally set to 31.4 trillion in January 2023. After months of warning of an imminent and economically disastrous default from the U.S. Treasury, President Joe Biden in June 2023 signed a bipartisan debt bill that suspended the cap until January of 2025. This effectively allowed the government to keep borrowing without limits through next year. They know the system is going down, so why not go all out, right? Go all the hell out. Let's just go all out. Debt spiked to 32 trillion less than 2 weeks after the bill was approved and has been piling up ever since. They're going all out. The debt held by the public could surge by 19 trillion over the next decade to surpass its 55 trillion mark. Now, guess what? We don't have a next decade here. Scripture says his inward thought is that his house shall continue forever. So we don't have a next decade here, Lord willing. Because by then we'll be in the kingdom, Lord's willing. Owing to the mounting cost of an aging population and higher interest expenses, according to recent projections by the Congressional Budget Office, CBO. Since entering office, Biden has spent trillions on COVID relief as well as on infrastructure. The U.S. has also spent billions in aid for Ukraine. The Biden administration, however, has been insisting that tax cuts signaled into law by then President Donald Trump were to blame for the ballooning national debt. And make no mistake, many businesses and corporations and wealthy middle and upper class and rich Americans made thousands of dollars, even millions, off all this. Meanwhile, the poor, kept being poor. Poor is at the bottom. Nobody cares about the poor. Last month, Biden unveiled a 7.3 trillion. That's why the scripture says they're gonna howl for misery and for vexation and spirit, because the Lord is gonna take away all that riches, all that wealth that they have amassed. Last month, Biden unveiled a 7.3 trillion budget plan for 2025, which would push U.S. debt over 100% of GDP. As he laid out a physical agenda, and do you know what that was going to do to inflation, man? That boosts spending, but plans to save. And what is inflation? Simply put, inflation is when the value of the dollar depreciates, and as a result, the cost of goods and services increases exponentially. According to Esau's technical definition, inflation is the general increase in goods and services due to the expansion of money supply within an economy. Expansion meaning that there's a massive amount of printing of money. But when that happens, they devalue the dollar, the money. So the cost of things go up. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. That boosts spending, but plans to save $3 trillion through higher taxes over 10 years. Republicans in the House of Representatives have described the proposed budget as a roadmap to accelerate America's decline, accusing the Biden administration of reckless spending and of engaging in a runaway spending spree that disregards physical responsibility. They don't give a flying F, man. They said, F it. This shit is going down. We're going to just go all the F in. F it. In other reports, Erdogan blames Israel for Iranian attack. And so this is big news because they're going to look to silence this guy. They're going to look to do something to Turkey too. But when they're going to make set attempts, guess who's going to be a guard as well onto Turkey as they will be onto Iran? Gog. Of Magog. The chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. Western hypocrisy helped bring about an escalation. And Gog is Russia. Russia, as El Apostle Har broke down many times in the past, means head prince, chief prince, which in the Hebrew is Ra'ash Shar. Ra'ash means head, and Shar means prince. All right, Ra'ash Shar, Rosha. For more the Rosha, as they would say in the movies, right? Just add a little bit of levity to the lesson. It says the Turkish leader has said, Iran's first direct attack on Israel is the fault of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Not a Jew, first and foremost, that because he's a gutter rat. He's a massive splinter. He says, first and foremost, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said. In a televised address after a cabinet meeting in Ankara, Erdogan said it was unfair to look at last Sunday's events in a vacuum. The one chiefly responsible for the tension that grappled our hearts on the evening of April the 13th is Netanyahu and his bloody administration, he said. Since October 7th, the Israeli government has opted for provocation moves in order to spread the fire to the entire region. The Israeli government targeted the Iranian consulate in Damascus, violating international law and the Vienna Convention, and that was the last straw, added Erdogan. Tehran's diplomatic mission was struck on April the 1st, killing 7 high-ranking officers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, IRGC, Quad Force, including 2 generals. Israel never officially claimed responsibility for the strike, but has repeatedly bombed Syria, claiming preemptive self-defense from the Iranian presence there. We have seen the double-standard approach of Western countries, Erdogan said, pointing out that only a handful of countries condemned Israel's move, but rushed to denounce Iran's response. Tehran eventually launched scores of drones and missiles against targets inside Israel. The US, UK, France, and Jordan helped the Israelis with air defense, but some of the projectiles got through, causing unspecified damage. Erdogan also blamed Israel for the current conflict in general, saying its forces have indiscriminately killed tens of thousands of Palestinians, civilians in Gaza, including people standing in line for humanitarian aid. For more than 132 days, Israel has been implementing genocidal policies, the Turkish leader claimed. Netanyahu declared war on Gaza-based Hamas after the Palestinian military group raided nearby Israeli villages and military bases last October. Much of Gaza has since been reduced to rubble and the civilian population pushed to the edge of starvation. A recent report by UN Human Rights Council Special Reporter Francisca Albanese has accused Israel of intending to commit genocide in the enclave. And this concludes the article. Now, what does the scripture says about the least of the flock? This is Jeremiah 49, verse 20. Therefore hear the counsel of the Lord Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, that he had taken against Edom, the so-called Caucasian race, beginning with their hegemony, their leadership, the elites, the banking families, the Rothschilds, the Gates, the DuPonts, the Rockefellers. They are the wicked, according to Malachi chapter 1, verse 4, in whose hand, which in the Hebrew is Yad, which means power and strength, the earth has been given into, according to the book of Job, chapter 9, verse 24. And his purpose is that he had purpose against the inhabitants of Teman, which Teman, Edomites. But the wise men of Teman are the Edomite Germans. Surely the least of the flock, which is the state of Israel, shall draw them, which is America, Babylon the Great, out where? Into the valley of Jehoshaphat, which is located in the so-called Middle East, in the Arabian Peninsula. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. How? Through thermonuclear destruction. Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 45. Therefore hear ye the counsel of the Lord Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, that he had taken against Babylon. Notice the Lord is now using Babylon in the 50th chapter, the 45th verse. And in the 49th chapter, the 20th verse, he said Edom. So we see that Edom and Babylon are synonymous. And his purpose is, prophetically, that he had purposed against the land of the Chaldeans, which the land of the Chaldeans is here in America, Babylon the Great. Refer to Isaiah the 47th chapter, where it speaks about how this man has indulged in witchcraft from his youth. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out, which is, again, the state of Israel shall draw America, Babylon the Great, out into the Arabian Peninsula in preparation for the war of Armageddon, the thorough woe. Surely he shall make their habitation desolate through thermonuclear fire with them. All right, so that concludes the lesson. This has been another in the news report. Lord's willing has been edifying, informative, straight to the point. And shalom to the elect until the next Lord's willing.